Hi everyone, this is video 2 of how to make a sewing machine cover that's bespoke for your machine. On the last video I mentioned having a 1-inch seam allowance around your side and your length. Now I've changed that because I had a thought, actually I'm going to be using a 1/4 inch seam allowance on my when I actually start the sewing. So I thought actually 1 inch is a bit too wide for me. So I have recreated my seam allowance just using 1/2 inch. That means that when I'm sewing my 1/4 inch seam, I know that there's going to be another 1/4 inch gap around the whole of my machine. And for me, that's quite a nice fit. But if you want to make a 1 inch seam allowance, or maybe you want to do 3/4 inch, or you don't work in inches at all and you want to do it in centimeters, you work out your own seam allowance. But I decided to remeasure mine with a 1/2 inch seam allowance going all the way around. I've then recalculated my fabric measurements all the way around, and for me it's reduced it down by 4 inches. So this was the shape for my featherweight, but I'm going to put that to one side because I'm not going to be making my featherweight one today. What I really need is a cover for my 201, which is in the cabinet, and you saw that in the first video. So here's my shape for my 201, Mr. Gondor, but I also have a 15K and a treadle. So once I'd done my measurement for my 201, I then had a look at my 15K and it was pretty much the same shape. So it means that this one pattern piece I can use for both my 201 and my 15K. I've measured the fabric length all the way around, and I know that for mine it's 18 inches by 25 inches and 3/4. When you start cutting your fabric out, I've already cut a piece of fabric that's 18 inches by 25 and 3/4. Now that's the piece of fabric that's going to go up and over your machine. You then have your two side panels. Remember when you're cutting your fabric, so I've cut my fabric ready, remember that that's one side, but so that's, say, the right hand side of the cover. When you're cutting your fabric, you have to reverse your shape to make the left hand side. So what you should have, let me turn it that way so you can see, I have reversed sides. This is my right hand side and that's my left hand side piece. When I did my measuring, I know that this long side is the front of the machine, and this curved piece, which is matching my balance wheel, I know is at the back of the machine. So my side panels are reversed fabrics. What I've also done is I have interfaced all of my fabric pieces. I'm just going to show you interfacing. I use a lightweight fusible interfacing, and you can see that's quite floppy. It has a soft side and it has a bobbly side, and that's where the glue dots are. So it doesn't actually look like much. It's a bit thicker than tissue paper, but once ironed on, it fuses to your fabric. I'll show you on here. So this piece has interfacing on it and this piece doesn't. If I hold it up, it's just flopping like that. If I try to hold it, that's what your fabric would look like without an interfacing. That's with an interfacing. So I can kind of hold that and it starts to hold its shape. What it's not doing so much of is that, I mean, if I hold that in the same way, you can just see how that flops down and that holds its strength. So you can see the interfacing has just been ironed onto the back. I always interface all of my fabric pieces. It does two things. It starts to add a bit of structure to the fabric, but because you're fusing it all the way around, if you've got fabric that tends to fray, this will help to stop your fabric fraying at the edges. What I also use is foam. I use fusible foam. This is fusible foam. As you can see, that's, I get that in the camera, that's quite thick, but it's very sewing machine friendly, even for vintage ones. And if I just press that down, that starts to squish, so that will compress under your needle. So although it's quite thick and would be bulky, once it goes under machine, it does squish really well. So what I've done is I've interfaced all of my fabric with a lightweight fusible interfacing, and I've also cut the same pieces, the shapes and the long piece of fusible foam. And my fusible foam is one-sided. It's got the glue dots on one side and it's got a soft fleecier feel on the other side. I've interfaced and fusible foamed my long piece and one of my side panels. Now I wanted to add a pocket and also a slip pocket and a zip pocket to the side of my cover, so that I can put bobbins in and I can put my sewing machine manual in the cover itself. So if I hold these side by side, this one has I keep saying memory foam. This one has the fusible foam and this one doesn't at the moment. What I've done is I've cut some pockets. I'm just using the same fabric for the pockets. And I actually used, which was just helpful, there's a natural crease in this bit of cardboard, and that actually worked out quite well as a pocket size. So I measured my pocket up to this crease line. But you can have, if you're going to do slip pockets, you can have a slip pocket any length that you want. I'm just going to have one on the side of the machine, but if you want to, you can have a slip pocket going across the whole front of your machine, and you can work out your height just by the side panel piece, and obviously the length is going to be the same length as the length of the base. You can then divide those pockets up how you like. I'm just going to be doing a slip pocket and a zip pocket on just one side of my panels. So I've interfaced both of these. I have two of those. The first thing I'll do is put them right sides together, and I'm going to be sewing a 1/4 inch seam right away across. Then I will fold them so that they're right side facing up, and then I'm just going to top stitch. I will then be able to add my pocket onto the front of my side panel piece, and I'm going to do a line of stitch going all the way down the center, and then I have a slip pocket here and a slip pocket there. One side will be for my manual and the other side will be for scissors, probably, rotary cutter, seam ripper, usually the things that start going missing. I'll just pop something on the side there. But what I'm also going to do is I'm going to have a zip here, which is why I haven't put foam on yet. Now to make a zip, cut a piece of fabric. I'm just using all the same fabric. Cut a piece of fabric around 2 inches long, and you want to kind of make it about the same sort of width as your side panel piece. I think my zip's going to go about there. My zipper facing is got a little edge on the end, but I can just cut that off afterwards. But what I've then done, let me move that out of the way, I'm going to hold it like that so you can see. I've created a rectangle in the middle of my zipper facing. I've done this on the wrong side of the fabric. The zipper is 3/8 of an inch wide, and then I've done around about 1/2 inch from either end. I've then done a line in the center of my rectangle, and then I've done 2 triangles at either end. This is going to be where my zip will fit in, and I'm going to show you on the sewing machine how this works. But if you do want to add a zip, you create a zipper facing first, and then just work out roughly where your zip is going to go. So the zip is going to fit inside this box. If I hold that up, So I'm just roughly working out, yep, that's where my zip is going to go. What I've also done, and that's why you're seeing blue fabric, is these are going to be my zipper pockets. Now I've just cut them to the same, pretty much the same width as my zipper facing, but at the moment they're quite long, but I can trim the bottom of my pocket afterwards. But essentially what that's going to be is a zip on the side and then a nice long pocket hidden in the machine cover case. I will then have my slip pockets on the outside. So what you will see in the end is just a zip and just slip pockets. Once I've placed my zip, and I'll take you over to the sewing machine to show you how I do that, I will have my zipper pockets hidden underneath, then my zip, and if I flip it over, on the back of the panel, I'm going to have my zip pockets a bit flapping on. Once that is done, I will then fuse my foam. What that does is it will fuse the zip pocket against the foam, my exterior piece on the top. And what that does, if I hold that like that, what it does is anything that I put inside my zip pocket is not going to be bulging out on this side and hitting the machine. It will, if anything, will bulge on this side, but I'm not going to be putting big things in there that would cause it to bulge. But this piece of foam is going to stop the zip pocket and anything inside the zip pocket from bulging towards the machine. The foam stops that, and it will, if anything, will bulge away from the machine. So I'm going to pause the video and we're just going to go over to the machine, and I'm going to show you how to add a zip and how to get your pockets ready on the side of one panel. Okay, so now we're at my machine. I have chosen where I want to put my zip, and I've just put a pin in place just to stop this zipper facing from moving. What I'm going to do is sew around this rectangle all the way around. I am using a hand crank, so it does take just that little bit longer. Make sure you don't go over your pin. Oh no, I've put that pin just out of the way of the presser foot. When you get to the end of the rectangle, leave your needle in, lift the presser foot and just pivot round. Now I've just noticed that my stitch length is a little bit too long, so I'm just going to adjust that. And I'm just going to back up my stitch because I've just overshot. That's better. My machine was still set on a much longer stitch. That's much better. And then down to the other end, the shorter piece, another pivot. And I'm just going to go just a few stitches around. Get my scissors. And then what you should see, well, let's get rid of that bit. I can get rid of my pin now. So hopefully you can see that in the camera light. I've just done a rectangle all the way around. The next thing you're going to need is your seam ripper. And we're going to slice that middle line. What I like to do is start with the seam ripper and just do enough of a slice to be able to put the scissors through. We're going to go all the way to the start of this triangle, and then we're going to angle the scissors and cut into the corners on both, and then on this end as well. Try to get as close to the stitching as possible, but obviously don't cut the stitch. push that through. I'm just going to make just a little slice, and then I can carry on with the scissors and just snipping all the way down until I get to that triangle point, and then I'm going to angle the scissors and just cut as close to that corner as possible without cutting the stitch. Now I can work all the way down to the other side, up to that triangle point, and then turn and go right to the edge. So go as close as you're comfortable with. So now we've created a gap in the middle. The next thing you're going to do is take your zipper facing and push it through. So it's all going to be pushed through into that hole. It's a little bit tricky. And if I turn it over, what's happened is it all starts to, it takes a bit of negotiating. It's also a bit stiffer because it's got the interfacing on it. But with a bit of persuasion, you have now brought your zipper facing through to the other side. Now at this point it's handy to, there. At this point it's a good idea to go over to your ironing board and just press that down so that you've got a nice crisp seam. I'm just going to turn it over so that you can see this side. And that's what we've created. We've created a zipper envelope. No, not envelope, letterbox. And then with your zip, the next thing we're going to do, or in a minute, we're going to add the pockets. But the zip will sit inside. There, getting camera. Will sit inside your newly formed letterbox. So I'm going to pause the video and I am just going to go and press that seam so that it lies nice and flat. You may find that it buckles slightly at the edges, and if you find it is buckling, it's generally because you haven't cut close enough to that corner. But with a bit of encouragement with the iron, you can see I haven't quite got to the edge. With a bit of encouragement from the iron, you can get that relatively pressed flat. So I'm going to go over to the iron, I'm just going to press that down, and then we're going to make the zipper pockets. So I've pressed my zipper facing now, and that's made that envelope, keep saying envelope, letterbox. It's made that letterbox quite neat now. And pressed flat. So we're just going to put that to one side, and we're going to work on the zip. So to do the zip, take one of your zipper pockets, right side facing up, and then you're going to put the zip on top. Now my zip obviously is way too long for my pocket, but that's okay because I can trim it down afterwards. And what I'm going to do is just baste stitch a 1/8 seam allowance all the way across the top edge. Make sure it's nicely lined up. You don't have to worry about the zipper pull. If your zip is too long, you don't have to worry about your zipper pull just yet. We're going to trim that down anyway. So I'm just going to baste. Yeah, you can see that on the camera. Just make sure that stays lined up. Now I'm just going to run the stitches past the zip a little bit. It doesn't matter too much. If you are using an electric machine or a machine that has a reverse stitch, then you can reverse stitch at the beginnings and the ends. So I've done one side. Now we're going to flip it Now if you've got your iron still hot, you can just press that seam away. What you want is your pocket to be away from your zipper because you don't want to be sewing that. Next, take your other zip pocket lining piece, right side facing up, and we're going to do the same thing again, and we're going to attach the other side of the zip. Your pocket should be right side facing up, your zip should be right side facing up, but the pocket we've just done is right side facing down. And then just, although we're going to do it at the edge, you want to make sure that your pockets are also lined up. Now if you want to use clips just to clip it in place, I'm just gonna kind of do it by eye because it is only a small zip. So same thing again, get enough thread behind, and we're going to do a 1/8 seam allowance again on the other side. Now if you have a vintage machine that doesn't have a reverse stitch, what you can do is 3 stitches, then lift the needle up, lift your presser foot up and pull it towards you, drop it, and then sew over those same stitches again, and that locks in the stitch, very similar to the way a reverse stitch does. The other option you've got is actually to spin the fabric round, stitch a few stitches, and then come back on yourself again. But for this, sometimes I'll just lift the presser foot up. So we now have our lining pieces. So our zip should be facing up, and our lining pieces, if I turn that, if you can see that in the camera, the pockets are now right sides together, but the zip is right side facing up. Now if I undid the zip and looked inside, both of my pockets are the right sides, and the seams are all on the outside of the pocket, so when you open the pocket, you're not going to see any of the seams. What you want to do next, take your letterbox, you want to open up your pocket. Now if you have your iron, press your pockets away from your zip. Now you can decide at this point whether you want the pull on the left or on the right. For me, with my cover being on my zip pockets on this side, I want to be able to push the zip away. So I'm going to keep my zip pull on the right hand side. And then you simply place your letterbox on top of your zip. And there you have it. What we're going to do is just run a 1/8 seam allowance all the way around that box. But I need to get my pull ready, otherwise if I stitch as it is, I'm not going to be able to use my zip. So let's move that out of the way, and let's just bring the zip in a little bit. Going to push that back, and then I'm just going to pull the zip all the way over and just hold it on that side. So you might just want to just give it a jiggle. You just want to make sure that your zip is in the center of your box. And again, you can use pins if you want to. But we're going to do the same thing again. So I'm just going to bring it, slide it over, make sure my threads are at the back. You can start anywhere on the zip. I usually just start on the left hand side, about halfway down. I'm going to snip the threads after anyway. Now when you get to this end, can you see that on the camera? Yeah. When you get to this end, you're obviously going to need to move your zipper pull out the way because it's going to get caught in your presser foot. But we're just going to do it nice and slowly, and you're just going to lock that in. Now I'm going to have to lift my presser foot and manipulate this pull just out the way a little bit, just so that I can do the turn. Let's go one more across, very carefully turn it round. Now because I've opened up the zip's going to spread away like that, so I want to just try and make sure that that's together. And then I'm using a plastic zip, which means my needle will just chomp through that, no problem. If you're using a metal zip, you're going to have to be very, very careful you don't break a needle going through. Now my zipper pull is in the way again. Let's just push that back. And then you can just run down the other side. Excuse me. Got a bit of loose thread there. There, do another spin, and I'm coming back round now to where I started, straight through the zip, which is fine. Spin again, and I'm coming right back to the beginning again. Just going to run over those stitches and then I can come away. I normally trim my threads as I go along. So there you have a zip built into the center of your case, your cover. I will trim these threads afterwards. What I want to do next is just flip it on this side, and then I won't show you on camera because this is the easy bit, but I'm just going to match up my pockets. Now obviously you can see my pockets are way too long, so I'm going to probably come in about an inch. Actually, I can do that on camera. I'm just going to eyeball it. You just want to make sure that your pockets about there. You just want to make sure that your pockets are the same length. Now you can see my pocket is going to overshoot the cover, so I don't want that to be caught in the stitching. So when I'm sewing my pockets, I'm going to be sewing down one side, all the way across the bottom, and then all the way up the other side. But you don't want to sew the cover, so you're going to have to bend the cover out the way, and you're just going to be stitching just the edge. So I'm probably going to stitch about here so that it's not going to get caught when I'm doing the main body of the machine. So I'm going to pause the camera and I'm just going to do that stitch. Now I've trimmed, if I turn it over, I've trimmed down my pocket. It's all nicely sewn up now. And I've just snipped the edges of the zipper off. So now I have my zipper and it's unzipping well, and inside now I have a nice pocket. The next thing we're going to do is move this out the way. I'm just going to do my slip pockets. So slip pockets are nice or easy. You just put them right sides together, match up the top edge, and we're just going to do a line of stitching. Now I don't want the edges of my stitching to come away, so I'm just back stitching. I'm actually using a 1/8 seam allowance instead of a 1/4 inch, but you just want to make sure that they're stitched together. And then open it up, fold them wrong sides together, and just go and press that seam, which I will do now. Well, actually, if you haven't got your iron or you're only doing one bit, you can actually roll the edge of the seam between your fingers, and that will just give it a nice crisp edge, and the heat from your fingers will help to do that in the same way that an iron does. But if you'd prefer to iron the top, that's fine. And then I'm just going to run a line of top stitching. you've got left to do, just going to close my zip. You can then match up your pockets where you want your pocket to be. Now I want the bottom edge to match up. What you can do is run a line of basting stitch all the way around the edge of your pocket. It just helps to keep that in place when we're doing the final assembly. And then what you might want to do is measure the width of your sewing machine manual if you have a small one, and then do a line of stitching, or you can just do them completely down the middle, or you might decide to have one big pocket and then maybe 2 or 3 smaller pockets, say for your stitch ripper, seam ripper, a pen. You can do whatever you want. So I'm gonna stop this video and then we'll talk about the final assembly. But what I will do once I've done my pocket, I'm gonna turn it over and I'm gonna baste my last, not baste, I am gonna iron on my final piece of foam so that that seals in that pocket completely.